Now, with the early season well underway or just around the corner for you, I want to really address, and some of this is the difference between hunting a buck versus hunting a doe. For example, there's a lot there going out in the early season. They just want to shoot a doe and get some venison. There's nothing wrong with that. Dylan, you're doing that tomorrow, right?
This weekend. Well, yeah, tomorrow and then, this weekend as well.
Yeah, so nothing wrong with that, but it's a little bit different. Strategies are different. When I'm going out hunting a doe this time of year, like we could possibly go down our driveway, slip through some corn, and watch a green food plot right coming out of the switchgrass, and we have a good chance of a doe and fawn. They're coming out every night, and so that consistency is something that you can play on when it comes to does and fawns in the early season. Food source consistency, water hole movement, whatever it might be. They're bedding close to their food source. They're moving very little during the daylight, but it's dependable and reliable. And I often talk about, even on private land, one of the best signs of great property is that your doe herd is consistent. Does should be easy to shoot, easy to kill, and that is not the case with a mature buck. They're independent thinkers. They get to that level and they get to that age by being a single thinker one. They rely on themselves, no one else. They're not thinking herd mentality, and their patterns shift greatly. A doe family group, they'll pretty much stay in the same cover, the fawning cover, in the spring, summer, and into the fall. If there's still food, if there's still cover going into the fall and even into the winter, they'll stay in the same spot. So their home range is very small, and it's not even just a home range during the day or during the month of October. It's all year long compared to a buck, where a buck will have a completely different location that he actually lives and eats and beds during the summertime versus the fall. Completely different habitat. He's willing to travel. And I'm not just saying that it's just different food. It's in different cover. Think about it. He wants open overstory and shade. He wants cool airflow during the summertime, and he wants summer food sources. Well, those are gone, so he has to move. Does, on the other hand, they want thick cover. They want summer food. So if the food stays consistent in some appreciable amount, they're homebodies, they'll just stay home. They're almost different creatures. A mature buck is willing to travel a long ways for food during the fall. And food sources are always shrinking. So if you have great food going into November and you have good bedding, you're not pressuring the land, you have a chance to collect the biggest buck in the neighborhood, because 95% of all parcels and landowners are not doing that. So it creates an opportunity for you. Bucks are a lot different than does. Does consistent. Go out and shoot one in the early season patterns. They're on food. They'll be able to do the same thing every day. Pretty easy to pattern and get on unless you pressured them. Bucks are a different animal, different story. So first of all, that being said, they look for that food source. Expect the big buck shift. Sometime mid-September to mid-October, even late October, those bucks will shift movements. We were hoping to see one this year. We call them Jam 4. A really cool buck from last year. We figured he was about a 5-year-old. He was just a beautiful buck, maybe even 6. We figured he was a 170-inch buck last year, and this year he blew up into 185-inch, 190-inch, and we hadn't seen him. He doesn't come out of our land until mid-October, end of October. Well, one of our neighbors, Chad, he ended up shooting him last weekend. It was pretty awesome to see the pictures and hear the story from Chad, and just a giant buck. And he hadn't shifted yet. He was still on his summer patterns, and you have to make that choice. You want to be that summer pattern person where you can get to hunt them for a couple weeks in the early season before they shift, or do you want to have them all fall and be the herd influencer and not have that early season opportunity on them? And especially in September. October is a little bit different, but our season opens earlier in September. So bottom line is that they're going to shift, and expect that. And what I mean by that is Dylan and I are going out to a stand tonight. It had good deer movement, meets the criteria for being next to very good buck bedding. We've had some buck movement coming from an adjacent food source into this area to bed, often coming out in the evening, going in the morning, and we're just off to the side of that because we want to be in the middle of the movement. It's a really nice water hole setup. We're seeing some more immature 2- and 3-year-old bucks hit it, and younger bucks, does, fawns, especially in the afternoon. They'll go in from another location in the morning, and then they just come back through this way in the afternoon to get back to that location. And so we're going into that with the right weather. And that kind of leads us into just a main point here, is that I didn't go down there yesterday when it was a high of 90. I'm going in there today when it's a high of 68. And so a big cold front change, we expect movement. And this is the type of night where all of a sudden a buck that we don't have on camera, that we don't know has even been there, comes right in front of us. And so we're going in there. We're expecting a shift at some point. That's where I want to go hunt because it meets your criteria. It's an exit from bedding, buck bedding. It's a remote water source. And it's moving to a neighboring food source that I can depend on off the property. And I kind of, with private land in general, one of the worst things you can do is have food up against your neighbors, because then if they have good cover, that's where the bulk of the bucks and deer in general are going to bed on the way to that food source. So as a general rule, you're not putting food next to a property border. You do put cover, because if the neighbor infringes on cover from the outside, it just pushes the deer deeper into your land, especially if you're allowing for a lot of depth in that cover. So we're expecting that shift. We're looking for it. Maybe it'll happen tonight. We saw a new buck show up this morning. Pretty cool with a big temperature drop. It looks to be a young, but a beautiful 3-year-old with really tall tines, a 10-point clean 10. Beams that wrap all the way around. He's a really cool looking buck. And we really want to get a better look at him. So first time we've picked him up for the year. But we're expecting that to happen, and where we're going to hunt accordingly. We can also hunt that spot without, I think, a low impact. We can get in there and get out of there without spooking a lot of deer. So we'll see that. That remains to be seen. It's a whole new setup for us. And that kind of leads into number 2. Is you have to keep them from making them shift. A lot of bucks are shifting because of hunting pressure at the onset of the bow hunting season. So yeah, they're leaving for food and water and cover. They want something, especially food and cover, but they're moving because hunting pressure is applied to that property, and they know where to exit and go to. And then they go there for the rest of the hunting season sometimes. And so we want that property where they exit to. Our neighbor, if he would have applied a lot of pressure and spooked that buck, then we would have had a good chance of hunting them tonight in that location. So, but bottom line is we're expecting the pressure, and we're trying to do anything we can to keep from spooking a big buck there. And that's in this place, we're not seeing that big movement yet, so probably not very likely we're going to spook one. So hopefully he's in there. We'll get a chance at him tonight, but that'd be the first time even knowing he was there. If he's in there, that would be a result of this cold weather. The bottom line is you have to take great care not making them shift, because you can make your property an empty property. There's very few locations that are actually true mature buck hangouts. So when you're on those early season patterns, you make sure that you allow them to stay in that pattern, and you're just tapping away on the outside, not getting into the middle of his movement, where you can spoil not only a hunt tonight or tomorrow, but for a week or 2 to come as well. So I'm hunting big buck spots. I'm not hunting out the wide open food source corner where I occasionally get a glimpse of them right at dark. I'm not going into an area where I can spook a lot of deer. I'm not going where I see masses of does and fawns. I'm going into an area where I expect big buck movement because it's a remote location, exit from bedding. I love hunting that in early season in the evening as opposed to the food source. I'm hoping a big buck comes out of that bedding. What's really cool about that is if he does, for example, tonight we have a water hole there. He's on the way to a big food source. Everything lines up as far as his movement that he'd like to make. But the cool thing about that is they move by. As it gets closer to dark, less likely you are to see deer. That's a good thing, because then you can get out and no harm, no foul. You're not spooking anything. Where if you're right on that food source, obviously that's the opposite in the worst case scenario, where you're waiting for him to come to you. He doesn't come. You have a field full of deer. You get out, you spook them. Now they're not back for a couple weeks, especially mature bucks. And most people don't have a couple weeks to wait. They're off to a neighbor's, they get shot, and or they just don't come back. So you can't do that. Remote water sources are really like, we actually have sometimes water in the bottom where we're at right now. It's not often. People ask about that all the time. We expect a water hole to be the most consistent water offering in the area. You don't count cattle ponds behind a house, or just random fishing ponds. Those don't attract a lot of deer. They're not remote. We like our water holes back in the woods, in real close cover areas, near bedding areas where a buck can just step out, hit on his way to food, and he's not even getting to the food source until after dark, but he's there during daylight. So remote water holes, just because there's water on the property doesn't mean you don't have a water hole. It just means your water is the first water stop and the most reliable from his afternoon bedding on the way to food. That's always a great bet during the rut, but it's also a great bet in the early season where bucks are exiting after they've been sitting dry all day, eating regeneration, browse, acorns. They want to take a drink because they're thirsty. They've been sitting in brush all day, eating hard to digest woody browse and acorns, and now they're on the way to a food source in the evening. So a really good chance to sit on that remote water hole. And then finally, best food movement. And what I mean by that is we want a solid food source movement where these deer are predictably going to a food source, and then maybe you're hunting a small food source on the way. In our case, we're hunting a water hole, but you're hunting that small food source on the way, deer passing through and just passing by, or you're hunting that movement itself. And in our case, we're hunting a food source movement, we're hunting an exit from bedding, and we're hunting remote water all at the same time. So we're putting all those pieces together. I used to call it stand stories. I wrote some articles like that, and meaning that how many stories does your stand tell? How much depth is there to that story? You know, they're moving by elevation change, and they're moving across a certain bench that deer always travel on. They're crossing a ditch in this location. It's on the line of a habitat change. In fact, we're on the backside of a bedding. You're adding food to that, meaning they're heading towards food. You have a water hole in that location. Winds on your side, they're heading that direction anyway. So how many stories does your stand tell? How much depth is there to why a buck might be moving there in that location? Number 4, hunt other hunters. And what I mean by that is you know where other hunters are hunting, or you should know, in public land, private, and you're not hunting right within that movement trying to compete with them. You're going to another remote location. If I went into an area and I had 10 hunters hunting there and a couple cars, I'd go to a different location. If I was hunting public land, I'd want to try a completely different spot. Say, what conditions are leading hunters to this spot, and then I want to change the conditions and go find another spot. Find where I have a little bit more control, or I want to go deeper in, maybe come around a backside approach where I say, you know what, no one's slipping in this area from the opposite side 3 miles away. I'm going to come in this way and come to the backside of these movement, because then I'm hunting the movement created by all those other hunters on the other side coming out. It's amazing how hunters attract other hunters, because everyone thinks, boy, if they're hunting there, I don't know them, but they must be good hunters and they're going in there for a reason. Well, they might be going there because you're there, or because they saw the same flagging ribbon going in. Doesn't mean they're good hunters, but hunters attract other hunters. So be the one that's different, go to a different spot. But you're hunting hunters. You're either hunting because they're not there, or you're hunting because they're somewhere else and you know they're going to push deer to you. You know that you have invasive neighbors that are hunting. That means on that side of your property, you might have a good chance of seeing a buck. Tonight we're hunting near where Chad shot his buck, probably a half mile away from there. Because him going in and retrieving that deer, I think it was Sunday, and all the movement that he made, that was 3 days ago, then there's a good chance that he's pushed other bucks out of that area that we might have an opportunity at. And he's not going to be sorry, because he's already shot a 185 to 90 inch monster. So which is awesome for him. I'm really happy for him. But anyways, hunt other hunters. Make sure when you're going in on public land, you're looking for boot tracks, looking for crushed ferns, vegetation, signs of other hunters going in. If I have any of those signs, I'm not hunting there. I don't want to go in the same movement as someone else, hunting the same deer sign as someone else. I want to find a new spot. And I can tell you this right now, every state has great public land that you can go find with no hunting pressure. Doesn't matter if it's Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, Pennsylvania, New York, some of these big deer hunting areas. I've seen it firsthand over and over and over again next to private land. I won't even mention the states, but I've been on some this year where I just can't believe there's no one hunting on that public land. And yeah, it takes a little work to get in there. But boy, once you get in there, you have 180 inch bucks to hunt, and no one's doing it. And you see that over and over again. It's crazy, the amount of good hunting spots. Even in Michigan, I was by a public land in a national forest area. Perfect funnel where someone could hunt. In fact, the funnel was this. Here's a little pond right here. Pond meaning 20 acres. Here's the property that I'm on going this way. And this happened to be about 120 acres. Then there's a clear cut on federal land right here. That creates a funnel coming off the private land that goes to this, with federal land all to the southeast and all on this side. Parking area road that comes in this way. Continues on down, spot to park. Easy access, no hills. Walk along the clear cut. Get into a spot right here. Westerly winds blowing back into the clear cut where you don't expect any deer because it's open. And you can hunt that funnel that's probably only 80 yards wide. And they had 150 inch bucks. They shot 140 some inch 8-point last year coming off that public land. Beautiful bucks coming off there. No one hunts it. This is Michigan. This isn't like remote UP Michigan. This is northern central lower Michigan. where it's easily accessible and someone can go in there and easy hunt. So hunting other hunters, you can find locations even on public land where hunters are not, and you can use private land movements of your neighbors to your advantage as well. Number 5, I'll leave you with this. You really don't want to hunt your rut hotspots. You know, those areas you saw a bunch of deer movement last year, a bunch of buck movement. Bucks are not in that same mode in the early season. They're going straight from food, back to bedding, from bedding to food. It's pretty simple. At night, they could be anywhere. A lot of times they might wander a mile away and to a big hot food source, and then they're back home again. So they're really more straight line movers like does and fawns are just moving from a little bit deeper cover. And that's why it takes them longer to get there. But they're doing the same things as does and fawns. They just are getting out of their bed and moving towards food. A lot of times they'll hit water on the way, like I said, if it's a dry bedding area. So what we want to avoid are those cruising hot spots, cruising between bedding areas, looking for does. There's no reason for bucks to do that. Cruising in general, parallel to field edges. A lot of times bucks are cruising field edges because they're looking for that doe sign and scent coming in and out of those food sources. And they'll cruise those field edges. They're looking for does, fawns out in the field. And they can just scent check them on the downwind side of the field. So they're really cruising. They're doing a lot of things later in October and November that they do not do right now. So if you're hunting those areas, expecting cruising, paralleling field edges, you might be sorely disappointed, and you really need to hunt somewhere else and really look for our early season buck hunting hot spots, which is completely different from the rut. So hopefully it'll give you some insight. You know, I can make a list of these every year and they'd be a little bit different, but the principle is the same. You're hunting food source movement, you're hunting near bedding areas, then get that exit, you're hunting remote locations, you're staying away from other hunters, or at the same time using other hunters to your advantage by coming in from a different way, knowing that they're going to push deer on your property. But bottom line is, things are changing. Those bucks will shift. You'd expect that. The weather, a lot of times, brings new faces into the area. You can expect that. So if you have a spot you really think is a good buck hot spot, you can get in and out of safely, and it matches these conditions. Who knows? Like tonight, we might have 7-4, another area giant we're waiting to show up. Bo, he's in a different spot, but it'd be cool to have him go by. Bottom line is, one of those new faces might show up tonight with this giant temperature drop that we just had. I mean, literally, we're dropping for a daytime high 22 degrees going out to the stand tonight. So that's pretty cool from one day to the next. Gives us a different wind to hunt too, and we'll see what happens. But follow these tips for at least to help you find some consistent success on bucks. Again, bucks different than doe hunting. Going out to your favorite stand tomorrow, this weekend, or beyond. Folks, I want to make sure you check out my web class video series, whether it's how to design your food plot program or how to design your property in general. And we have a new one coming out that'll be how to hunt the rut. But these bucks back here are a testament. Some of these bucks go back to 93. They're even in different states. I urge you to check out those web classes so that you can help yourself, help your land, help your hunt. The link is in the description. And also for those that have tried them out, I encourage you to offer some feedback in the comments below. Thank you.